The alarm systems across the Galactic Council station screamed in every language known to civilized space. Ships poured out of hyperspace at the edge of Council territory. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They were human ships. Everyone knew it from the design, from the markings, from the simple fact that they appeared without warning or announcement. Captain Jinwoo stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dawn. His dark eyes watched the alien vessels scrambling to respond. Officers around him waited for orders, waited for him to speak, to give commands, to do something. He said nothing. He simply raised one hand and made a simple gesture. The fleet moved forward as one. The communications arrays lit up immediately. Every frequency flooded with messages. The Council demanded identification. Military commanders issued warnings. Civilian stations begged for information. Through it all, the human fleet maintained absolute radio silence. Not a single transmission left their ships. Not a word. Not even an acknowledgement that they heard anything at all. Ambassador Hyeron watched from the observation deck of the Council station. She had served here for 15 years, representing her people in the complex web of galactic politics. She had seen wars start over miscommunication. She had witnessed species nearly extinct themselves over simple misunderstandings. But she had never seen anything like this. The humans weren't attacking. They weren't threatening. They were simply there, moving forward in perfect formation, ignoring every attempt to contact them. The Council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives from 200 worlds shouted over each other. The Vrexians demanded military action. The Talvex wanted to negotiate. The Korthans suggested retreating and observing. Through all the noise, one thing became clear. Every species in the Council was afraid. These were civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. They had fought wars, built empires, explored half the galaxy, and now they were terrified of a species that had barely left their own solar system a century ago. Commander Tai Hyung received his orders within the hour. Take 300 warships and stop the human advance. Don't fire unless fired upon, but make it clear they cannot simply ignore Council authority. He was Vrexian, from a warrior culture that had never lost a major engagement. His people had been fighting wars when humans still lived in caves. He assembled his fleet with confidence. The human ships appeared on his sensors exactly where intelligence predicted. They moved at a steady pace, not fast, not slow, just constant forward momentum. Taehyung positioned his fleet in their path. 300 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy formed a wall of steel and energy. He opened a channel and delivered his warning in clear, simple terms. Stop or be stopped. The human fleet didn't slow down. They didn't alter course. They didn't even scan his ships to assess the threat. They just kept coming. Taehyung felt sweat on his forehead despite the cool bridge air. His weapons officer asked for permission to arm missiles. His tactical officer suggested a warning shot across their bow. Taehyung watched the distance close. 1,000 kilometers, 500, 200. At 100 kilometers, something inside Taehyung broke. It wasn't logic. It wasn't training. It was something primal. Something his warrior ancestors would have recognized. These humans weren't bluffing. They weren't testing him. They simply didn't care about his fleet. They would fly right through him, and somehow Taehyung knew his ships would shatter like glass. He gave the order to scatter. 300 warships broke formation and fled. Not a single shot had been fired. The human fleet continued forward without pause, without acknowledgement, without any sign they had even noticed the encounter. Back at the Council station, junior analyst Nari worked through the night in the archives. Something about this situation felt familiar, like a memory just out of reach. She searched through old records, diplomatic logs, historical files. Most analysts focused on military data or current intelligence. Nari preferred the past. She believed that most problems had roots somewhere in history. She found it at 3 a.m, a transmission from Earth dated 20 years ago. She almost scrolled past it because it seemed so ordinary. Just another diplomatic request for a council hearing. But something made her stop. She opened the full file and started reading. The request came from a human diplomat named Doyen. He reported that human colonies in the Outer Rim were being attacked, not by military forces or rival nations, by slavers. Unknown ships appeared without warning, stunned entire settlements and took everyone. Men, women, children. Entire colonies went dark. Thousands of humans simply vanished. Doyen's message was formal but desperate. He asked the council to investigate. He asked for protection for the remaining colonies. He asked for help tracking the missing people. The Council's response came 6 months later. A brief message explaining that Council resources could not be allocated to investigate every missing persons case in the Outer Rim. The matter was closed. Nari kept reading. Doyen sent another message. And another. Different diplomats joined him. They provided evidence, witness statements, tracking data. They sent hundreds of requests over the years. The files showed that the Council received them all. Some were dismissed immediately. Some were filed for later review. Some simply disappeared into bureaucratic limbo. Not one received serious attention. The last message from Earth's diplomatic corps came exactly 20 years ago. It was brief. It said that Earth was withdrawing all diplomatic staff from Council space. It said that humanity would handle its own problems from now on. It thanked the Council for nothing. Nari brought her findings to Ambassador Hyarin at dawn. They sat in Hyarin's office watching the human fleet on the monitors. The ships had stopped at coordinates in deep space. Long-range sensors showed nothing there, just empty vacuum. But the humans waited. Hyarin pulled up historical star charts and overlaid them with current positions. 20 years ago, there had been something at those coordinates. A small station. Records listed it as a fuel depot. But buried in classified files, Nari found the truth. It was a slaver way station. A place where captured humans were processed before being sold. The station was gone now. Destroyed years ago in what official reports called an industrial accident. But the humans remembered. They stopped at the exact spot where their people had suffered and they waited in silence. The fleet stayed there for exactly 1 hour. Then they moved on to the next coordinates. Hyarin started tracking their path. Every location matched a place from the old reports. Slaver bases, black market stations, and council worlds, specifically council worlds whose governments had denied human requests for help. The galaxy began to understand. Humanity wasn't here to talk. They had tried talking for 20 years. Now they were here for something else. And their silence was more terrifying than any threat could ever be. 20 years earlier, Doyen stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. He was young then, barely 30, and he believed in justice. He believed that civilized species helped each other. He believed that presenting clear evidence and making reasonable requests would result in action. He was about to learn how wrong he could be. The council members barely looked at him as he spoke. He showed them recordings from colony worlds. Empty streets. Abandoned homes. Children's toys left in the dirt. He showed them sensor logs of unknown ships appearing and disappearing. He showed them testimony from the few survivors who managed to hide during the raids. One colony had 3,000 people. All gone in a single night. Another had 5,000. Vanished. The raiders were efficient and ruthless. They used stunners that left victims alive but unconscious. They took everyone. The old, the young. Even the sick. To them, humans were just cargo. Doyen explained that Earth's small defense fleet couldn't protect the outer colonies. They were spread too thin. The raiders knew this. They hit the most remote settlements first. By the time help could arrive, there was nothing left but empty buildings and questions. He made a simple request. Allow Earth to purchase defensive weapons from Council manufacturers. Let human ships patrol deeper into Council space where the raiders seemed to operate from. Share intelligence about known slaver groups. These were not expensive requests. They required no military commitment from the Council. Just basic cooperation. The Vrexian representative spoke first. He said that humanity was too new to the galactic community. Giving them advanced weapons would be irresponsible. The Talvex representative agreed. She added that many species faced hardships on frontier worlds. The Council could not police every remote settlement in the galaxy. Doyen tried to explain that this wasn't about policing. This was about stopping mass kidnapping. This was about organized crime operating with apparent impunity. He showed financial records that suggested some of the slavers had connections to legitimate businesses. Businesses that operated in Council space. The Council listened politely. Then they voted. The measure failed to even reach committee. Doyen's request was denied. He was thanked for his time and dismissed. In the present, Nari and a rogue trader named Sunho followed the trail of evidence. Sunho had worked the frontier for decades. He hauled cargo to places most legitimate shippers avoided. He remembered meeting human refugees. broken people who had escaped from slavery and spent years trying to get back to Earth. They met in a dark bar on a station far from council oversight. Sun-ho drank something that smelled like fuel and told his story. He had seen humans in the slave markets. Not many at first. A few here and there. Humans were exotic, rare. Collectors paid premium prices for them. But over the years, the numbers increased. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. Sun-ho described the markets. Humans in cages barely large enough to stand in. Families separated. Children sold away from parents. The buyers weren't just criminals. Wealthy merchants bought humans as servants. Corporations bought them for dangerous labor. Some bought them for darker purposes that Sun-ho wouldn't describe. Nari asked why no one reported this. Sun-ho laughed bitterly. He explained that slavery was illegal in council space, officially, but enforcement was selective. The council focused on protecting established trade routes and important worlds. The frontier was different. Out there, laws were suggestions, and humans had no protection because Earth had no power to enforce protection. Nari spent weeks piecing together the full scope of what happened. The numbers were staggering. Conservative estimates suggested 5 million humans were taken over 20 years. 5 million. Entire colony worlds were depopulated. Some colonies tried to evacuate when they heard about the raids, but where could they go? The few ships they had couldn't carry everyone, and the council worlds wouldn't accept them. Earth was too far away and too poor to bring everyone back, so the colonies died slowly. Some were raided, some were abandoned as people fled. Others simply collapsed when their population dropped below sustainable levels. A whole generation of human expansion beyond Earth ended in mass graves and empty buildings. Hiran reviewed Nari's report with growing horror. She had served on the council for 15 years. She considered herself informed. She read reports and attended briefings. How had she missed this? How had everyone missed this? The answer was simple and ugly. No one missed it. They ignored it. The reports existed. The evidence was filed. The diplomatic requests were recorded. But humans were weak and far away. They had no fleet to threaten anyone. They had no economic power to influence policy. They were nobodies asking for help that would cost something to provide. The council had calculated that helping humans wasn't worth the expense or political complexity. Some council members had financial ties to the businesses that benefited from cheap human labor. Others simply didn't care enough to override those who opposed action. The result was 20 years of bureaucratic delay and diplomatic rejection, while millions of humans suffered. Hiran found Doyen's later reports. His tone changed over the years. The respectful requests became desperate pleas. He named specific businesses. He provided evidence of council officials taking bribes to look the other way. He even identified which council security forces were paid to avoid certain sectors where slavers operated. Nothing changed. Each report was filed. Each request was denied. Doyen's final message to the council was short. He wrote that Earth had learned its lesson. Humanity would remember who helped them and who turned away. Then he left. Earth's embassy on the council station closed. All human diplomats withdrew. The council barely noticed. Weapons specialist Minho worked on a different angle. He studied the human fleet from long-range scans. What he found disturbed him more than the numbers or the silence. These ships were not explorers converted for war. They were not cargo haulers with weapons bolted on. They were purpose-built warships designed from the beginning for combat. The technology was strange. Some of it matched council standards. Some was clearly human innovation. But all of it was new. The ships couldn't be more than a few years old. That meant Earth had been building them recently. But the designs were 20 years old. Minho found evidence in the architectural patterns. These ships were designed 2 decades ago and built when Earth finally had the resources to build them. Earth had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. While they sent diplomats and filed reports and made requests, they were also designing a war fleet. They knew the council would never help them. So they planned to help themselves, and they built their fleet in secret. The scariest part was the weapons. Minho couldn't identify half of them. Humans had developed military technology that the council had no records of. They had done it quietly while appearing weak. And now they had appeared with a fleet that might be more advanced than anything the council could field. Hiran realized the truth. Humanity had spent 20 years speaking. They spoke in every way diplomacy allowed. They were polite. They were respectful. They followed protocol. And they were completely ignored. So they stopped speaking. They built their fleet. And now they were here. Not to talk, to act. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions every day. Representatives from hundreds of worlds argued about what to do. The military faction wanted to destroy the human fleet before it could do whatever it came to do. The diplomatic faction wanted to establish communication and negotiate. The isolationist faction wanted to seal borders and let humanity do whatever they wanted, as long as it happened somewhere else. Hundreds of messages were sent to the human fleet. Offers of trade agreements, proposals for mutual defense pacts, apologies for past oversights, promises to investigate the old reports about missing colonists, everything the council could think of to make the humans talk. Every message was ignored. The human fleet continued its journey through council space. They stopped at locations that seemed random at first. An empty stretch of space here, an asteroid field there. But Hiren tracked each stop and found the pattern. Every location was tied to the slave trade. Every single one. Some locations were old slaver bases that had been destroyed or abandoned years ago. The humans stopped there anyway. They held position for exactly 1 hour. Hiren imagined they were paying respects to the people who suffered there. Then they moved on. Other locations were still active, stations, trade hubs, even legitimate colonies. The humans stopped at those places too. They didn't attack. They just waited in orbit, silent, watching. The effect on the locals was immediate. Stations evacuated, ships fled. The mere presence of the silent human fleet caused panic. The council finally agreed to send a delegation. 1 ship, 1 ambassador. No weapons. A pure diplomatic approach. Dozens of ambassadors volunteered, some because they genuinely wanted to help, others because they saw political advantage in being the one to establish contact. Hiren volunteered because she felt responsible. She had been here for 15 years. She had approved budgets and voted on policies. She was part of the system that failed humanity. The council chose her. She flew alone in a small diplomatic shuttle. As she approached the human fleet, her hands shook. These ships were enormous up close. Dark metal and sharp angles. No unnecessary decoration. Every surface looked functional. These were weapons built to look like ships. Her shuttle approached the flagship. No one stopped her. No one hailed her. The massive vessel just hung there in space like a sleeping predator. Then a docking bay opened. Just opened. No communication. No instructions. Just an invitation or possibly a trap. Hiren docked her shuttle and stepped into the bay. It was empty, cold. The metal floor rang under her feet. She walked toward the only door she could see. It opened as she approached. Beyond was a corridor. She followed it. Every door opened before she reached it. Every turn led her deeper into the ship. She realized they were herding her somewhere specific. She entered a large chamber, empty except for a table and 2 chairs. Captain Jinwoo stood on the far side. He was tall for a human. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. He gestured to a chair. Hiren sat. He sat across from her. Then silence. Hiren waited for him to speak. He didn't. She realized he was waiting for her. She opened her mouth to give a prepared speech about mutual understanding and diplomatic solutions. But looking at his face, those words died in her throat. This man didn't want speeches, so instead she said something simple.
She asked him what he wanted.
Jinwoo didn't answer. He touched a control on the table. A holographic display appeared between them. It showed a recording. Hiren recognized it immediately. Doyen's first speech to the council. She watched the young diplomat present his evidence and make his requests. She watched the council dismiss him. The recording changed. Another speech. Another request. Another denial. The recordings played faster. Years of diplomatic efforts compressed into minutes. Hundreds of requests. Thousands of hours of work. All ignored. All rejected. All filed away and forgotten. Then the recordings changed again. Hiren gasped. These were not diplomatic messages. These were surveillance videos. Slave markets. Humans in cages. Auctions where families were separated. Footage of raids on colonies. People being stunned and dragged onto ships. Children crying for parents. The videos went on and on. Hiren felt sick. She had read the reports, but seeing it was different. Reading about 5 million people was just a number. Watching them suffer was something else. She watched a small girl being pulled away from her mother. Both were screaming. The buyers just watched and made notes about pricing. The recording stopped. Jinwoo reached into his uniform and pulled out a small data chip. He placed it on the table between them. Then he stood and walked to the door. Hiren called after him. She asked him to please say something. Anything. He stopped at the door but didn't turn around. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then he left. Hiren took the chip back to her shuttle. Her hands shook as she loaded it. The file contained a list, names, thousands of names. She recognized some immediately. Council representatives, business leaders, station administrators. Next to each name was a location, and next to each location was a number. She realized what the numbers meant. They were prices. This wasn't just a list of people involved in the slave trade. It was a ledger. How many humans each person bought, how much they paid, when they bought them. Everything documented in cold detail. Hiren cross-referenced the locations with the human fleet's trajectory. Every place they had stopped matched a location on the list. Every place they were heading matched a location on the list. The humans weren't just sailing through council space. They were following a map of guilt. She returned to the council station and presented the chip in emergency session. The reaction was immediate chaos. Representatives checked the list frantically. Some found their own names. Some found colleagues. Some found their entire governments implicated. The Talvex representative tried to claim the list was fabricated, a human trick to divide the council. But then someone checked the financial records. The transactions were real. The money had moved exactly as the list claimed. Banks across council space had records of payments for human cargo. The evidence was undeniable. Half the council chamber tried to flee. Security locked the doors. Fights broke out. A Vrexian representative attacked a Korthan who was listed as buying 300 human workers for a mining operation. The session dissolved into violence and accusation. Through it all, Hiren felt numb. She checked the list for her own government. Her people weren't buyers, but they had denied requests for help. They had voted against investigations. They were complicit through inaction. And now humanity was coming for everyone who participated, whether actively or passively. News of the list leaked within hours. It spread across the galactic network like fire. Species turned on each other. Citizens demanded answers from their governments. Why did you buy slaves? Why did you ignore the humans? Why did you let this happen? Some governments collapsed immediately. Leaders resigned or were forced out. Others tried to defend themselves. They claimed they didn't know the workers were slaves. They thought they were legal contract laborers. These excuses rang hollow when evidence showed humans being bought at auctions like livestock. Military forces across the galaxy mobilized. Some prepared to defend against the human fleet. Others prepared to arrest the people on the list. And some prepared to defend those people. The galaxy fractured along lines of guilt and fear. Through it all, the human fleet continued its journey. Silent. Unstoppable. They didn't respond to military threats. They didn't acknowledge diplomatic offers. They just followed their map. And with each stop, the galaxy's fear grew, because everyone realized the same thing. Humanity had been wronged terribly. And now humanity was collecting debts, and no one knew when or how to make them stop. The human fleet arrived at Talvex Prime 3 weeks after Hiren's meeting with Captain Jinwoo. Talvex Prime was a wealthy world. It had been peaceful for centuries. Its cities were beautiful. Its economy was strong. And it hosted the largest slave market in the known galaxy. Officially, Talvex Prime didn't have slave markets. Officially, they had employment centers and contract labor agencies. But everyone knew the truth. If you wanted to buy sentient beings, Talvex Prime was where you went. The local government looked the other way as long as taxes were paid. The humans didn't announce their arrival. They appeared in orbit and waited. Talvex defense forces scrambled. Military ships took defensive positions around the planet. Planetary shields activated. Every weapon pointed at the human fleet. And still the humans said nothing. Governor Yejin of Talvex Prime sent desperate messages. She explained that the markets were private businesses. The government didn't control them. She offered to shut them down immediately. She promised investigations and prosecutions. She begged the humans to respond, nothing. The wait lasted 6 hours, long enough for news networks to arrive. Long enough for half the planet to evacuate. Long enough for everyone watching to understand that something terrible was about to happen. Then the humans acted. A single ship detached from the fleet. It was smaller than the others, almost elegant in design. It descended toward the planet. Defense forces targeted it immediately. Yejin ordered them to hold fire. If they shot first, they would give the humans an excuse to destroy everything. The small ship entered the atmosphere. Sensors tracked it flying toward the capital city, toward the district where the markets operated. Yejin evacuated the area. Millions of people fled in panic. The ship arrived over empty streets and silent buildings. What happened next took exactly 30 seconds. The ship fired a weapon no one recognized. There was no explosion, no fire, no shockwave, just a pulse of energy that washed over the market district. When it cleared, every building related to the slave trade was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged. Gone. Reduced to dust so fine it looked like sand. The weapon was precisely targeted. A market building would disappear while the structure next to it remained untouched. An auction house vanished while a residential tower 2 meters away stood undamaged. The precision was impossible. It was terrifying. In 30 seconds, every slave market, every auction house, every holding facility on Talvex Prime ceased to exist. Not a single other building was damaged. Not a single person was hurt because everyone had evacuated. The humans made their point without killing anyone. The small ship returned to orbit. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. All of it happened in silence. The galaxy watched the recordings in horror. The message was clear. Humanity had weapons that could do anything they wanted. They could strike with absolute precision. They could avoid civilian casualties while destroying specific targets. And they would use these weapons on anyone involved in the slave trade. Lieutenant Yuna led the tactical teams that came next. While the fleet drew attention, smaller human ships operated in the shadows. They appeared at stations and facilities across the galaxy. They deployed teams that moved with frightening efficiency. The targets were individuals on the list. Crime lords who had built fortunes on human suffering. Business owners who knowingly bought slaves. Station administrators who allowed the trade to happen. One by one they were extracted. The extractions weren't violent. The teams didn't break down doors or fight guards. They used technology the Council had never seen. They materialized inside secure facilities. They walked through security systems like they weren't there. They took their targets and vanished. No one was killed during extractions. No property was significantly damaged. The humans just took people and left. Where they took them, no one knew. The extracted individuals simply disappeared. Their families received no communication. Their governments received no ransom demands. They were just gone. Wu Jin was a Korthan crime lord. He had built an empire on illegal trade. Drugs, weapons, information, and people. His organization had moved thousands of humans through his networks. He made millions. He was powerful and protected. He thought himself untouchable. He recorded a message and broadcast it across the galaxy. He begged the humans for mercy. He claimed he was just a businessman filling market demand. He said he was willing to pay reparations. He offered to help find humans still in captivity. He promised anything if they would just leave him alone. The humans didn't respond. 3 days later, Yuna's team appeared on his private station. They walked through his security like ghosts. His guards couldn't stop them. His panic rooms didn't slow them. They found him hiding in a vault designed to survive planetary bombardment. They pulled him out and took him away. His station was found a week later. Empty. Everyone who worked there was gone. Not just Wu Jin. Everyone involved in his operation. Hundreds of people extracted simultaneously. The station drifted in space like a tomb. Ships that approached found meals half-eaten on tables. Doors standing open. No signs of struggle. Just absence. Back at the council station, Hiran argued with anyone who would listen. She said the humans had to be stopped. This wasn't justice. This was terrorism. They were destroying the established order. They were making the galaxy ungovernable. Engineer Jiho asked her a simple question. Did the people on the list deserve protection? Hiran said everyone deserved due process. Trial by jury. Legal representation. All the safeguards of civilized justice. Jiho pulled up the old reports. Doyen's reports. The ones that detailed exactly what happened to enslaved humans. Torture, medical experimentation. Some were worked to death in mines. Some were used as entertainment in blood sports. Children were taken from parents and sold to collectors who wanted exotic pets. He showed her testimony from survivors, humans who escaped and spent years trying to get home. They described conditions that violated every law the council claimed to uphold. And all of it happened while the council did nothing. Jiho asked Hiran where the due process was for 5 million humans. Where were their trials? Where was their justice? The council had 20 years to provide legal solutions. Instead, they provided excuses and delays. Now humanity was providing their own justice, and it was making everyone uncomfortable because it was working. Hiran had no answer. She wanted to believe in the system. She had spent her life serving it. But looking at the evidence, she couldn't defend it. The system had failed, completely, and humanity was filling the void left by that failure. The galaxy split into factions. Some supported the humans. They said this was justified vengeance for unprecedented crimes. Others opposed them. They feared what humanity might do if not stopped, and many just wanted to survive. They liquidated assets and fled to the frontier, hoping humanity wouldn't chase them. Merchant Kyung represented the third group. He had done nothing illegal. He wasn't on the list, but he was scared. He had seen what the humans could do. He watched governments fall and powerful people disappear. He decided the galaxy wasn't safe anymore. He sold everything and bought a ship. He loaded it with supplies and headed for uncharted space. Thousands followed his example. An exodus of civilians fleeing council space, not because humans threatened them directly, but because they no longer trusted the galaxy they lived in. 3 months into humanity's campaign, the economic systems began to collapse. Trade routes shut down because no one trusted their partners anymore. Were they on the list? Would the humans come for them? Better to cut ties and hide. Stations that served as trading hubs went bankrupt. Businesses folded. Unemployment spread. The council tried to stabilize things, but they had no authority anymore. Half the representatives were under investigation. The other half were focused on survival. Hiran watched it all from her office. The galaxy was tearing itself apart, not from human attacks, from fear. Fear of what the humans might do. Fear of what they represented. Fear that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy deserved what was happening. 4 months after the human fleet first appeared, the galaxy reached its breaking point. Governments had collapsed. Economic systems were failing. Millions were displaced by fear and uncertainty. And still the humans continued their silent hunt. The list was almost complete, but the cost was becoming impossible to ignore. Hiran made a decision that could end her career or her life. She didn't ask permission from the council. She didn't file a flight plan or request an escort. She simply took a diplomatic shuttle and flew directly into the human fleet's path. She positioned herself where they would have to go through her or around her. Then she waited. The human fleet arrived 6 hours later. They didn't slow down. Hiran's proximity alarm screamed as the massive ships approached. She thought they might just fly past her, or through her. But at the last moment, the fleet stopped. The flagship moved forward alone. A docking bay opened. Hiran flew into the bay expecting to be arrested or worse. Instead, she was again herded through empty corridors to the same chamber. Captain Jinwoo waited there. He looked tired. The months had worn on him, but his eyes were still hard, still focused. This time, Hiran didn't wait for permission. She stood in front of him and spoke. She didn't give diplomatic speeches. She didn't make excuses. She simply apologized, not as an ambassador, not as a representative of the council. As one person to another, she said she was sorry. Sorry for what happened to his people, sorry for the council's failure, sorry for her own failure. She had been here for 15 years. She had voted on budgets and approved policies. She could have pushed harder for investigations. She could have demanded action, but she didn't. She was complicit through inaction, and she was sorry. Jinwoo watched her without expression. She couldn't tell if her words meant anything to him. She kept talking anyway. She explained that the galaxy was collapsing, not from human attacks but from fear. Systems were failing. People were suffering. Many were innocent. They hadn't hurt anyone, but they were paying the price anyway. She asked him what humanity wanted. What would make them stop? What price would satisfy them? She begged him to talk to her, to give her something she could bring back to the council. Anything. Jinwoo was silent for a long time. Hiran thought he might leave again without speaking, but then he took a breath and said something. His voice was quiet, controlled. But it carried the weight of decades of pain. He told her that humanity never wanted vengeance. They wanted justice. They wanted the galaxy to acknowledge what happened, to admit the crime, to hold people accountable. But the galaxy chose silence, so humanity learned to speak in the only language the galaxy understood: fear. He explained that diplomacy failed because humanity was weak. No one respected their requests because they had no power to enforce consequences. So they built power. They spent 20 years designing ships and developing weapons while pretending to give up. They let the galaxy think they accepted their place. And they waited. Now they had power. Now the galaxy listened. Not because humanity was right, but because humanity was dangerous. The lesson was clear. In this galaxy, justice only exists for those strong enough to take it. The Council taught humanity that lesson, and humanity learned it well. Hiron asked about the list. How many names were left? Jinwoo said 73. 73 individuals who played major roles in the slave trade. He offered her a choice. The Council could turn them over within 10 days. If they did, humanity would withdraw. The hunt would end, but there was a condition. The galaxy must build a memorial, 5 million names. Every human taken, every life lost. It would be built on neutral ground where every species could visit. And every species must teach their children what happened. Teach them what happens when they ignore suffering. Teach them that silence has consequences. Hiron asked what would happen if the Council refused. Jinwoo's answer was simple. The hunt would continue. Not just for the 73, but for everyone who helped them. Everyone who protected them. Everyone who profited from their crimes. The list would grow, and humanity would never stop. She asked him if he thought this was justice. He said no. Justice would be returning 5 million people to their families. Justice would be erasing 20 years of suffering. But those things were impossible. So this would have to be enough. This would be the price the galaxy paid for teaching humanity that words were worthless. Hiron returned to the Council with Jinwoo's terms. The debate lasted 3 days. Some representatives wanted to refuse. They said giving in to threats would destroy Council authority. Others pointed out that Council authority was already destroyed. The choice was between symbolic pride and actual survival. The vote was close, but eventually pragmatism won. The Council agreed to humanity's terms. The 73 individuals would be turned over. Most were already in custody. A few had fled. The Council promised to hunt them down. They would face trial for crimes against sentient beings. The memorial took 2 months to build. It was constructed on a small moon orbiting a neutral star. The structure was made of black stone that seemed to absorb light. The names of 5 million humans were carved into the surface. But they weren't just carved. Each name was backlit so it glowed softly in the darkness. The memorial stretched for miles. Walking past all the names would take days. Each section was organized by colony, by family, by the ships they were taken on. The detail was staggering. Someone had kept records of everyone lost. Someone had documented everything. Hiron attended the dedication ceremony. Representatives from every major species came. Not because they wanted to, because they had to, because humanity was watching. The ceremony was simple. No speeches, no politics, just silence as thousands of humans walked among the names. Captain Jinwoo was there. Hiron watched him move through the memorial with a young woman. She was crying as she touched certain names. Jinwoo held her hand, but his face was stone. Later, Hiron learned the woman was Jinwoo's daughter. Half the names in one section were her family members. Her mother, her siblings, her grandparents, all taken when she was a child. Jinwoo had spent 20 years hunting the people responsible. The human fleet prepared to leave after the ceremony. They had completed their mission. The 73 were in custody. The memorial was built. The galaxy would remember. Jinwoo sent one final transmission to the Galactic Council before departing. The message was brief. He said humanity spoke for 20 years. They used every diplomatic channel. They followed every protocol. They asked politely and then desperately for help. And the galaxy taught them that words had no power, that only force mattered, that justice belonged to the strong. He told the Council to remember that lesson. Remember that they taught it. Remember what happened when humanity refused to speak and started acting instead. Remember the fear. Remember the chaos. Remember that it all could have been avoided if someone had just listened 20 years ago. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. They vanished as suddenly as they appeared. The galaxy was left with its memorial and its shame and the knowledge that somewhere out there, humanity was watching, always watching. Years later, Hyeron retired from the council. She became a teacher. She taught young diplomats about the human crisis, about the cost of indifference, about what happens when civilized species choose convenience over justice. She made every student visit the memorial, made them walk among the names, made them understand that those 5 million glowing,